So, you've made such significant contributions to medical science, leading breakthroughs and treatments for over 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, and obesity. And from your website, you made a statement which I'd love to quote here is that you said that when I first set out on my journey to study food as medicine, I realized that I was up what I was up against. The food industry did not care about health, and the health industry did not care about food. I'm a medical scientist, and my mission is to bridge both of these worlds to help people everywhere become healthier while enjoying and not being afraid of their food. Dr. Lee, can you explain your inspiration, which is so fundamental for everyone's daily life, right? Food is a medicine. Where did this inspiration come from? Where did this awakening, this shift, how did it transpire?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a relatively small city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that was had a lot of ethnic communities, and there was a great celebration of culture, and particularly the foods associated with the cultures. So I grew up, my childhood was always surrounded by these wonderful inspirations where people were very proud of their backgrounds and their heritage and the food that came out of it. So, fast forward to my education, I'm a biochemist, so I was trained as a scientist. And in fact, I have now developed a very long career as a vascular biologist, which means I study blood vessels. And I'm also a doctor. I study internal medicine, and that means that I take care of men and women, young and old, healthy and sick. And my own orientation has always been towards health. Now, being trained in medicine, the focus of most Western medical training, education is on diagnosing and addressing illness. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I have been actively involved with my research background in helping to develop new biotech-oriented treatments for cancer and vision loss and healing, wound healing. And so I sort of cut my teeth, and I have real street cred in terms of the life sciences and what it takes to develop a treatment, an intervention for disease. But one thing that always bugged me was the fact that when you're treating disease, it's the horse out of the barn, so to speak, where you've missed the biggest opportunity of all, which is to prevent the disease in the first place.
Yes.
And here we are, in society, lamenting about the unsustainable cost of healthcare. And yet we could actually upend that dilemma. We could actually solve that dilemma by really preventing diseases in the first place, and therefore saving the money. So we can actually then have the resources to treat those people for whom prevention was not successful. And so that always led me to think about prevention. Now, when you talk about diseases, you can talk about drugs. But, drugs are expensive. They're not always accessible to everyone who needs them, even in developed parts of the world, especially in developing parts of the world. And then they always have side effects. I mean, every drug can have a side effect. And so it's really not appropriate to talk about prevention in terms of drugs, pharmaceuticals. There are a few exceptions, but I think for the most part, you're going to talk about prevention, you got to talk about a different type of intervention. And this brought me all the way back to my childhood. And I always remembered the pride that people from the Mediterranean, for example, or people from Asia, they had in how they thought about food as a continuum of part of their health. And food actually is a much more equitable, safer, more joyful solution compared to drugs, right? And so you can use food as medicine, as opposed to medicine as medicine for prevention. And that's what led me, after many years of being involved with biotech development, why don't we actually study foods using the same rigorous science and systems that we do drug development? And so I'm one of the early people that actually studied food as medicine in that way. And when we did that, I'll tell you a quick story. Sure. I had a collaboration at the National Cancer Institute. This is back in the 90s, where we were screening drugs or possible drugs for their activity against cancer. And by then, my nonprofit organization, my charity called the Angiogenesis Foundation, we'd been so successful. There were well over a dozen new treatments that had come out. from our work. And so I got to be a little bit more daring. And so while we were screening cancer drugs, I pulled off the assembly line about a dozen of the test drugs, and I swapped them in with food extracts that I had ordered. Now, we disguised the swap so that the researchers, the technicians, would have no idea what the samples were. But when the results came out, and again, this was actually a very, very serious test used to assess whether or not a chemical that was sent to us from different biotech companies would have potential to treat cancer. And the results came out, my jaw dropped because 50%, half of the foods that we were screening that I snuck in there were as or more powerful than the drugs that we were testing.
Wow.
So that was really an eye opener for me to realize the power that science, that real science could bring to the table. And that's really what I do now. I mean, I take that rigorous science-based, like an uncompromising approach. And that's one of the things that I, am forced to do really, or compelled to do as well.
Hey there, are you ready to use food to improve your health? I do cover a lot in my YouTube videos, but there's only so much time to dive deep into how to use food as medicine. That's why I created my Eat to Beat Disease course. In my course, I walk you through how to use everyday foods that you can find in your grocery store to boost your body's health defenses. This is all based on my research, and everything is rooted in science. And I've made it super easy to follow with practical everyday tips. Whether you're trying to prevent disease or just want to optimize your health for longevity, my Eat to Beat Disease course gives you all the tools to make it real and to help you get lasting changes that will help you live longer and live better. To learn more, click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen. I can't wait to get started together in my course. Now, back to the video.
Actually, the best way to live long is to dodge, prevent, thwart the conditions that are going to rob you of your life. They're going to cut you down short. Okay. And if you can dodge those, what are those things? Cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cancer, just to say a few things. Like if you got any one of those three things, you're probably not going to make it as long as you would like to, chances are, because you've got all these other conditions which are, we think, largely preventable with diet and lifestyle. Genetics for cancer plays maybe 5% of the equation. Sure, screen for cancer genes. That would be good information for you to know. But honestly, if you didn't have the tools for screening, just live a healthy lifestyle, avoid things that are carcinogenic or toxic, eat healthier whole plant-based foods primarily, eat diversity, watch your gut microbiome. You'll make it a lot of the ways and dodge the cancers that you can. And if you do have one of these diseases, I'm a cancer researcher. If you look at the statistics, 1 in 2 men are going to develop cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 3 women are going to develop cancer in their lifetime. So think about it. With those stats, you go into an elevator with a bunch of people, on your way to a holiday party or whatever, wherever you're going to go. I mean, you look around and you're like, my gosh, this is like a terrible statistic, right? But actually, a lot of cancers are preventable. And, and you can dodge colon cancer and breast cancer and a lot of other cancers. If we only had a better immune system, if we only had better control over our circulation, so we're not feeding cancers with a new blood supply, if we were able to have diets that actually killed off cancer stem cells, if we had more antioxidant opportunities to neutralize those free radicals, or that would cause oxidative stress to trigger mutations in our DNA. We can fix our DNA as well. If there's ways that we could actually lower inflammation, which is the gasoline to cancer. You might have a tiny incipient cancer. You have inflammation on top of that. Okay. Now you're basically pouring gasoline onto the embers of a fire. It's going to roar. Okay. And then it's immunity, our immune system. And I read about this in my first book, Eat to Beat Disease. We are hardwired for health. We've got 5 health defense systems. If we could actually keep those shields up and fortify them and tend to them like we would with the gate to our house or the locks on our window or a lock on your door, we'd actually get a lot further away. We'd probably dodge a lot of cancers. And there are foods that can do it as well. Diet and lifestyle. It's not just the food, but food actually, we now know there are certain foods that can actually have a pretty profound effect. And so this is another example, like metabolic syndrome, like this stealer of years. Okay, this robber baron of longevity is cancer, which seemed to be so nefarious. Did you ever see the latest Denzel Washington movie called Equalizer?
Yeah.
Equalizer
course, yeah.
3.
Yeah.
So there's this Italian guy who basically said, oh, this organized crime, locally is like cancer. There's no cure. You know what? That was a great line in the movie, but in fact, there is a cure to cancer, and we know it now. I mean, I as a cancer researcher, I'm seeing it in motion. We're not quite there yet, but with immunotherapy, I got to tell you, if you want to see an amazing story that's based on science, go check out the Instagram account of a person that goes by the handle The Brainy Blonde. Okay. She's blonde, very smart. All right. It's like a triple entendre, but she had brain cancer, glioblastoma, death sentence. Nobody survives more than 1 or 2 years with that things. She's going on almost 7 years, cancer-free. And you know what she did? She took a peptide vaccine that boosted her own immune system, all right, and that was able to get her through. So in the future, this is what we're going to be able to do to conquer the scourge. That's still treatment. Much better to prevent it in the first place so you don't have to go through that pain and suffering.
Yeah. Awesome.
When it comes to like the latest data on the subject, I think the thing that everybody is hearing about, obviously, is, I mean, even if you look at a chart, just like the explosion in the number of cancer cases versus, and so what's the risk of an individual today developing cancer in their lifetime? What's the latest data on that?
So these cancer statistics that we're seeing, the rise in cancer cases, and also the earlier cancers, younger people are getting more cancer. This is sort of an evolution that's happening. It's kind of a tsunami that we're starting to see on the horizon, right? So you remember, the picture of that in Indonesia, the beach, and you can kind of see the wave coming, forming in the distance. Like this is what we're actually seeing with cancer. We don't really have a clear explanation yet of why. But there's a lot of ideas that are out there. The climate, the environment, the pesticides, the microplastics, the additives in our food. I mean, the sedentary lifestyle. I mean, it could be a perfect storm of all these different factors. I don't think there's one guilty party, but there's something clearly going on that is awry. I mean, I heard the other day of a teenager getting colon cancer, which is like unheard of. When I went to medical school, you would never see anything like that. But this is the kind of thing that's actually happening. But what are the statistics? Well, if you look at the American Cancer Society, basically you would say 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men are going to develop cancer in their lifetime. That's a very crude averaging of lifetime cancer risk. Mm-hmm. That means, look, there's you and me, 2 men. All right, one of us is going to get it. Add some women in the room, 1 in 3. Go into an elevator with 10 people, all right, like 2 or 3 people there are going to get cancer. So these are the stunning statistics that make people really scared, except there are clearly things that we can do to prevent cancer. And a lot of people don't know this, but that only 5 to 10% of cancers are due to genetics. The rest is due to environment, diet, and lifestyle.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's the one big thing that seems to be highlighted. I mean, if you were to look at and this is a lot of what Dr. Casey Means talks about, but if you look at a chart and see this tsunami that you're talking about with the cancer cases, and then you would also chart, the explosion in fast food restaurants and ultra processed food, in pollution in our environment, like you're seeing these things go up. I mean, it's not exactly like you're studying in a lab and like this is exactly what's causing it, but there's like this correlation of things that you're seeing rise. I think the thing that's most surprising to people probably is specifically what you were saying with young people, like that there's a 79% rise in cancer rates amongst young people defined under 49 years old. And and then you just mentioned the cancer case with a teenager. What would be happening like for that specifically? I mean, people thought it was like an older person's disease. Like what would specifically be happening that there would be a rise in people that are younger now that were.
Yeah. I mean, putting the kind of pinpointing the cause, like single cause, we haven't been able to figure it out yet. But I'll tell you on a personal level, as a cancer researcher, some of the things that I think about. Yeah. I think that's fair enough. I think that with the way that we have put so many additives in our ultra-processed foods and how common that is, and the way that our water supply has become contaminated with microplastics and nanoplastics, which are clearly inflammatory. And inflammation is sort of sets up the environment for cancers to explode in terms of its growth. I think that it's hard to say that kids leave a sedentary lifestyle, but hey, if you're a gamer, you're sitting in your chair all day long. That's kind of sedentary. That actually can contribute as well. All these things kind of like degrade your immune system, cause more inflammation, sort of tip the balance in your body just in the wrong direction that would favor cancer. But I do think there's probably more going on than that. But those are clearly some of the factors. I think the gut microbiome is another one, because I do research on the gut microbiome. So for people who are not familiar with this, the gut microbiome are the healthy bacteria that live inside our gut. There's about 39 trillion of them, all right? And where do they live? They live in the colon primarily, which is sort of the last third of our gut. They live specifically in a little pouch called the cecum. Cecum is right where the appendix is. And we used to think the appendix was useless. If somebody getting like a surgeon, if they were in a child's belly or teenager's belly for whatever reason, they saw the appendix, they'd go, whoop, snip, let's take it out. Don't need that. That's like a extra piece of skin. Well, we're beginning to rethink that, because maybe, just maybe, the appendix plays a role, just like our tonsils play a role in our immune system. And one of the things that we're beginning to think is perhaps the appendix has an air traffic control function with the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome lowers inflammation, raises your immune system, controls healing in your body. And I do think that this is something we've only really begun to recognize seriously in the last, let's say, decade and a half. A lot of the factors that you mentioned, the pollution, the contaminants, additives, all of those things actually, almost all of them can negatively affect the healthy ecosystem of our gut microbiome that we need to lower inflammation.
That's really good. Yeah, I think that, and we'll get to the in your first book, the way that you outlined all the 5 defense systems in the body, I thought was just so interesting, because a lot of people are not well versed in what those defense systems are. And then even the treatments that you were talking about when it came to cancer and the defense systems in the body. I mean, obviously the microbiome is one of them, but then when it comes to the immunotherapy and then also angiogenesis and targeting it that way, I think is interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, when it comes to like the on the front end, when you're talking about the risks and what is actually like causing this, is there anything else you would add about like modern life that you feel like, we're going to talk about food, but like would be things to be aware of that maybe we could counteract in terms of being proactive?
Yeah, there's a lot that we could actually unpack there. Some of the basic things I would say is that you hear a lot about superfoods, in quotes, and everybody's trying to sell their own favorite superfood or super supplement. What I say is that there's no single food or supplement that's really super. It's the human body that's really super. Like, we have these incredible defenses in our body, and I write about 5 of them in my book, Eat to Beat Disease. They actually are what is responsible for our health. Our health isn't just the absence of disease. Our health is the product of our health defenses firing on all cylinders. It's kind of like, health defense is kind of like home defense,
You got your lock on your door. You got a fence at your gate. You got a burglar alarm. You got a fire alarm, a smoke detector, a latch on your window. All these things prevent the bad guys from coming in. Okay. And in the body, our health defenses prevent those bad guys, the diseases, from overtaking our body, from home invading our body. But you wind up actually leaving the window open, keeping the door unlocked, turning off the alarm, let that fire alarm expire, the batteries don't work anymore, or the smoke alarm. And when something happens, it could actually wind up having a real negative consequence. So what I say is that the things that we need to do are eat foods that boost our body's health defenses. And I've listed tables, pages and pages of foods that can do this. And at the same time, you want to avoid foods and lifestyle practices that degrade or destroy your health defenses as well. Cuts both ways. You can raise the shields, you can lower the shields. You don't want to be lowering your shields. So some of the things that are very clear in my mind to be able to stay away from. Now, my research is actually what you should add to your life to enhance your health. I try to spend less time kind of bashing foods. In fact, I don't really like to bash foods. We're all human. We all like to do the things we like to do. If you spend more time eating good stuff, you have less room to eat bad stuff.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, some of the clearly bad players, many ultra processed foods have a ton of additives in it. Just take a look, a lot, and I think this is a good practical take home for anybody listening or watching this. If you're buying something that's in a box or a bag or a can or frozen in the frozen section, you pick it up before you put it in your cart. Hold it up and look at the ingredient label and see what's in it. I'm not talking about the macros, like the protein and how much fat and all that. Like, that's important, but I want to look at the small print, the stuff that they try to really make so small it's hard to read. Sometimes for me, when I do that, I actually have to take a photograph of it on my phone and then enlarge it with my fingers. I just expand it so I can see what's in there. I want to know how many additives are in there. And recently, the FDA, the US FDA, removed red dye number 3 from the food products. They banned it. Well, 30 years ago, if you can imagine, was when we all first realized that red dye number 3 can cause cancer. And yet it's been left in our food supply for 30 years, 3 decades. We're talking about what are some of the possible causations for this rise in cancer risk? And by the way, the other thing that's kind of nuts is that even though the announcement of the ban was made on, one day, the government is giving permission for the food companies to have for 2 more years on the shelves until they can figure out how to swap out red dye. Now, I can tell you, it doesn't make any sense to me. You should take it off the shelves immediately. Once you deem it's no good, especially for something like cancer, why wouldn't you just remove it immediately? Let the food companies figure out how they're going to fix that. And then consumers can feel more trust in the system. And I think this is a whole other dimension of what is being discussed today is how do we learn to trust our food system? Where do we get our information from? Who are the voices that really know what they're talking about, as opposed to, delivering a message that may or may not be true, may or may not be trustworthy? So on top of all the other factual things that, we've been talking about when it comes to cancer or health or environment or exposures, I think we've got this other layer of complexity, which is how do you find trusted resources to get information that is true?
No, that's really good.
Hey there. I've got something important to share with you, and that is my guide to the 3 healthy foods that you might want to avoid if you're looking for longevity. Many products that are marketed as nutritious can actually undermine your health. And if you want to find out more about these sneaky ingredients and how to make better choices, then just click on the link below the video for all the details. It's very important to know what's really in your food, and this resource that I'm giving you gives you a head start. Get it right now for free in the description below. Or you can access the guide by scanning the QR code on the screen with your smartphone. Now, let's jump back into the video.
The World Health Organization classified processed meats as a class 1 carcinogen, which is kind of significant because tobacco is also listed as a class 1 carcinogen. Can you explain, so what falls under the category of processed meats and why are they harmful to their health?
Okay. Yeah. So let's first, this is kind of a loaded topic, so to speak, because, there are people that follow a carnivore diet. There's people that follow a vegan diet. And this is where food almost is like a religion. My God is better than your God. But in point of fact, humans evolved over our entire history to really be able to eat different types of foods. And some of the more interesting longevity studies, actually, for people who are super agers, who live to 105, 110, they're omnivores. They're not vegans. Okay, they eat a little bit of everything. They just don't eat too much. And so I wanted to set that out, before we dive into the meat thing, because I think it's important to then isolate this idea, like, okay, what is it about meat and processed meats that could be potentially harmful? Well, regular meat, whether you're talking about beef, pork, chicken, duck, whatever, and I suppose an animal protein like fish or shellfish, it's a source of protein. And you get lots of minerals and other micronutrients that are actually part of an important balanced diet. Now, you can definitely nix meat of any sort and get plenty of protein and get most of your micronutrients from plant-based sources as well. So again, I'm right down the middle of the aisle here, which is, it's a matter of personal choice. Don't eat too much meat, because red meat in particular has a lot of saturated fat. And by the way, how you prepare your meat also matters. I'm going to get to the process of meat in a second. I know you're waiting for that.
No, yeah.
But let's talk about like just regular red meat. All right. If you make a stew versus put something on a grill that you haven't cleaned and it's got all these carcinogens that are coming out of the smoke. All right. If you deep fry your chicken fried steak, you change something you take something that may not be that great for you, and then you turn it into something that's really not that good for you. Okay. You eat once in a while, not a big deal. You eat for you have a lifetime habit of eating this way, it's going to add up. Now, what about processed meats? Because look, we all grew up, going to the carnival, the state fair, whatever it is, ball games, getting hot dogs, and that kind of thing, the sausage. And I can tell you that these processed meats are not fresh kill like you would have with a T-bone, steak, right? You're talking about meat that was taken off, ground up, mixed with other additives, preservatives, chemicals, flavorings. Some of those flavorings are artificial as well. I did not know this until I really looked into this red dye number 3 thing. Hot dogs are often colored with red dye number 3. Like hot dogs don't come out of the beef, out of the pig, or the beef or the cow looking red. Okay, I mean this is food coloring. So you just think about that. Now you put into a casing, all right, and then think about that, which is then a processed meat. You've changed it from its native form. Now let's take a look at some of the other types of meats like pepperoni. Okay. Now you're actually adding all kinds of spices. Now you're throwing them into like baths with preservatives in them. All right. That's why the pepperoni, you look in the store, like the skin is wrinkled. You ever go into a bathtub too long? Your skin gets wrinkled. That's what happens. These pepperoni sticks are sitting in these like baths for a long time. Look, clearly you have changed the original source of the food into something else. That's what processed meat is. Is it the nitrates? Is it the artificial additives, the BHT? Is it we don't really know. Again, we're always searching for that one smoking gun, but it's probably a multiplier of these things, and how the food is cooked, and what the food is eaten with. If you're somebody that eats hot dogs all day long, okay, you're probably not eating a lot of salad. You're probably not eating a lot of vegetables. So it could be not just something that you're eating, but it could be ganging up with something you're not eating at the same time. And this is why, I think it's really important to be fair and balanced and take a kind of a balanced view when you're looking at this. But that said, all the population studies, so we're talking about looking at millions of people, have shown worldwide that eating a high amount of processed meats, sausages, hot dogs, all that kind of stuff. Sandwich meats, like the lunch meats that we used to get when we were kids, that our moms used to make for us, or you get at the lunch lady. That stuff is not good. It's not good for you. It's just not a good source of nutrition. Okay. And it actually has additives, and it's a class 1 carcinogen. And it's just something that really we need to be aware of and do less of. Cut down or cut out is what I say.
Yeah. I mean, it really was one of the surprising things for me, even when I watched the original video. I mean, because people were sitting here and being like, hot dogs cause cancer, or processed meats cause cancer. And I think when you really break it down the way you were just talking about, with all the preservatives that are added to it and the way that the meat is cured and it's just such a modification from like, I'm just taking a piece of pork and like eating it like a slab of like pork right from the animal. There's just so much modification that's going on with it.
Yeah. Now think about it. Go to the deli, right? In the grocery store, and the deli counter, and they've got these cylindrical tubes of meat, like bologna, all right, salami, and you're going to slice it up. I guarantee you the animal doesn't come like that, right? I mean, you think about it. There's no part of an animal that is a cylinder like that. Doesn't. And yet that actually is how the factories have made it, manipulated the food. Do you know why, how those kind of processed meats are held together? Have you ever heard of meat glue?
Mm-mm.
All right. Early part of the 20th century, like the mid 1900s, the military wanted to figure out how to actually make meat scraps hold together better. So they figured out a chemical that could actually glue meat together. All right. And once they invented that, it got picked up by the processed food industry to say, oh, you know what? We can take scraps of meat, we can pulverize it into little tiny pieces and just pour meat glue in there, and we can shape it any way we want. That's how those cylinders come about.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea. That's like a new thing I'm learning today. That's crazy.
Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.